Book 5, Chapter 4 of The Black Arrow. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Black Arrow by Robert Louis Stevenson. Book 5, Chapter 4 The Sack of Shoreby. There was not a foe left within striking distance, and Dick, as he looked ruefully about him on the remainder of his gallant force, began to count the cost of victory. He was himself, now that the danger was ended, so stiff and sore, so bruised, cut, and broken, and above all, so utterly exhausted by his desperate and unremitting labours in the fight, that he seemed incapable of any fresh exertion. But this was not yet the hour for repose. Shoreby had been taken by assault, and though an open town, and not in any manner to be charged with the resistance, it was plain that these rough fighters would be not less rough now that the fight was over, and that the more horrid part of war would fall to be enacted. Richard of Gloucester was not the captain to protect the citizens from his infuriated soldiery, and even if he had the will, it might be questioned if he had the power. It was therefore Dick's business to find and to protect Joanna, and with that end he looked about him at the faces of his men. The 3 or 4 who seemed likeliest to be obedient and to keep sober he drew aside, and promising them a rich reward and a special recommendation to the Duke, led them across the market place, now empty of horsemen, and into the streets upon the further side. Every here and there small combats of from 2 to a dozen still raged upon the open street. Here and there a house was being besieged, the defenders throwing out stools and tables on the heads of the assailants. The snow was strewn with arms and corpses; but except for these partial combats, the streets were deserted, and the houses, some standing open and some shuttered and barricaded, had for the most part ceased to give out smoke. Dick, threading the skirts of these skirmishers, led his followers briskly in the direction of the abbey church. But when he came the length of the main street, a cry of horror broke from his lips. Sir Daniel's great house had been carried by assault. The gates hung in splinters from the hinges, and a double throng kept pouring in and through the entrance, seeking and carrying booty. Meanwhile, in the upper stories, some resistance was still being offered to the pillagers; for just as Dick came within eyeshot of the building, a casement was burst open from within, and a poor wretch in murrey and blue, screaming and resisting, was forced through the embrasure and tossed into the street below. The most sickening apprehension fell upon Dick. He ran forward like one possessed, forced his way into the house among the foremost, and mounted without pause to the chamber on the 3rd floor where he had last parted from Joanna. It was a mere wreck. The furniture had been overthrown, the cupboards broken open, and in one place a trailing corner of the arras lay smouldering on the embers of the fire. Dick, almost without thinking, trod out the incipient conflagration, and then stood bewildered. Sir Daniel, Sir Oliver, Joanna, all were gone; but whether butchered in the rout, or safe escaped from Shoreby, who should say? He caught a passing archer by the tabard. "Fellow," he asked, "were ye here when this house was taken?" "Let it be," said the archer. "A murrain let be, or I strike." "Hark ye," returned Richard, "two can play at that. Stand and be plain." But the man, flushed with drink and battle, struck Dick upon the shoulder with one hand, while with the other he twitched away his garment. Thereupon the full wrath of the young leader burst from his control. He seized the fellow in his strong embrace, and crushed him on the plates of his mailed bosom like a child. Then, holding him at arm's length, he bid him speak as he valued his life. "I pray you mercy," gasped the archer. "And I thought ye were so angry, I would ha' been carrier of crossing you. I was here indeed." "Know ye Sir Daniel?" pursued Dick. "Well, I do know him," returned the man. "Was he in the mansion?" "Ay, sir, he was," answered the archer. "But even as we entered by the yard gate, he rode forth by the garden." "Alone?" cried Dick. "He may 'a' had a score of lances with him," said the man. Lances! No women, then? asked Shelton. Troth, I saw not, said the archer, but there were none in the house, if that be your quest. I thank you, said Dick. Here is a piece for your pains. But groping in his wallet, Dick found nothing. Inquire for me tomorrow, he added. Sir Richard Shelton, he corrected, and I will see you handsomely rewarded. And then an idea struck Dick. He hastily descended to the courtyard, ran with all his might across the garden, and came to the great door of the church. It stood wide open. Within every corner of the pavement was crowded with fugitive burghers, surrounded by their families, and laden with the most precious of their possessions, while at the high altar priests in full canonicals were imploring the mercy of God. Even as Dick entered, the loud chorus began to thunder in the vaulted roofs. He hurried through the groups of refugees, and came to the door of the stair that led into the steeple. And here a tall churchman stepped before him and arrested his advance. "Whither, my son?" he asked severely. "My father," answered Dick, "I am here upon an errand of expedition. Stay me not. I command here for my Lord of Gloucester." "For my Lord of Gloucester?" repeated the priest. "Hath then the battle gone so sore?" "The battle, father, is at an end. Lancaster clean sped. My Lord of Risingham, heaven rest him, left upon the field. And now, with your good leave, I follow mine affairs." And thrusting on one side the priest, who seemed stupefied at the news, Dick pushed open the door and rattled up the stairs, four at a bound, and without pause or stumble, till he stepped upon the open platform at the top. Shoreby church tower not only commanded the town as in a map, but looked far on both sides, over sea and land. It was now near upon noon, the day exceeding bright, the snow dazzling, and as Dick looked around him, he could measure the consequences of the battle. A confused, growling uproar reached him from the streets, and now and then, but very rarely, the clash of steel. Not a ship, not so much as a skiff, remained in harbour, but the sea was dotted with sails and rowboats laden with fugitives. On shore, too, the surface of the snowy meadows was broken up with bands of horsemen, some cutting their way towards the borders of the forest, others, who were doubtless of the Yorkist side, stoutly interposing and beating them back upon the town. Over all the open ground there lay a prodigious quantity of fallen men and horses, clearly defined upon the snow. To complete the picture, those of the foot soldiers as had not found place upon a ship still kept an archery combat on the borders of the port, and from the cover of the shoreside taverns. In that quarrel also one or two houses had been fired, and the smoke towered high in the frosty sunlight, and blew off to sea in voluminous folds. Already, close upon the margin of the woods, and somewhat in the line of Holywood, one particular clump of fleeing horsemen riveted the attention of the young watcher on the tower. It was fairly numerous. In no other quarter of the field did so many Lancasterians still hold together. Thus they had left a wide, discoloured wake upon the snow, and Dick was able to trace them step by step from where they had left the town. While Dick stood watching them, they had gained, unopposed, the first fringe of the leafless forest, and turning a little from their direction, the sun fell for a moment full on their array, as it was relieved against the dusky wood. "Murray and blue!" cried Dick. "I swear it, Murray and blue!" The next moment he was descending the stairway. It was now his business to seek out the Duke of Gloucester, who alone, in the disorder of the forces, might be able to supply him with a sufficiency of men. The fighting in the main town was now practically at an end, and as Dick ran hither and thither, seeking the commander, the streets were thick with wandering soldiers, some laden with more booty than they could well stagger under, others shouting drunk. None of them, when questioned, had the least notion of the Duke's whereabouts, and at last it was by sheer good fortune that Dick found him, where he sat in the saddle, directing operations to dislodge the archers from the harbour side. "Sir Richard Shelton, ye are well found," he said. "I owe you a thing that I value little, my life, and one that I can never pay you for, this victory.